Summer is upon us. Do you want to stay cool and dry at night? Try bamboo sheets from CozyEarth.com. Not only do you get a good night's sleep and stay cool and dry, but also you get to save 21% off just by using our code at checkout. InfoGo. And they have a 100-night sleep trial, so it's a win-win. If you don't like them, send them back, but I promise you'll fall in love with them. And while you're over there, check out their socks. They have a whole line of apparel. And that's CozyEarth.com. Use our code InfoGo at checkout to save 21% off. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and that makes this Info on the Go.
feeding your curiosity wherever you go.
Have you ever heard of geofencing?
No.
This was a term that was given to me by somebody, my son, cybersecurity, and he's like, "Hey, you should really do one on this because a lot of people don't know what it is." They use it a lot in like murder cases, or you know what? Let's just jump into it and let our listeners figure out how they use it. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right. So it's a normal day. You stop at a coffee shop, nothing special, just a quick in and out, to get that dark roast coffee that you love, that I love. You check your phone, maybe you scroll for a minute, grab your drink, head back out, right? Later, you pull into a gas station, pay at the pump, barely giving it a second thought. That evening, you take your dog for a walk, or, maybe the kids for a walk around the park, whatever. Along the same quiet streets you always do. There's nothing unusual, nothing very notable, just another day that fades into the background.
A few weeks go by, and then one afternoon, there's a knock at your door. It's not a neighbor or a delivery, it's the police. They're calm, professional, but direct. They ask where you were on a specific day at a specific time. You hesitate because honestly, you don't remember. It was just a normal day. But they do. They mention the coffee shop, the gas station, even the area where you walked your dog. Now your mind starts racing. How could they possibly know that? You weren't being watched. No one followed you. You weren't even a suspect.
But then they explain you were inside of a boundary, not one you could see, not police tape or anything physical that you could really recognize, right? It's a digital boundary, an invisible perimeter drawn around a location after a crime had already happened, and your phone was inside of it. That's when it hits you. They didn't come looking for you directly. They started with everyone who was there and was in the background. Your phone became a data point, a symbol in a crowd, a dot on a map. And now that dot has a name, and that's geofencing. And whether you realize it or not, it's quietly reshaping how modern policing really works.
Now, what is geofencing? Well, at its core, a virtual perimeter drawn around a real world location. Think of it like an invisible boundary that exists only in data. No fences, no walls, nothing you can see. But it's very real to the devices interacting with it. When a smartphone, tablet, or even a vehicle crosses into or out of that boundary, a system can log it, trigger an action, or respond in real time.
So, in everyday life, this kind of technology is everywhere, just operating quietly in the background. Walk near a retail store and your phone, well, it might buzz with a notification. You're nearby, here's a coupon. Well, that too is geofencing. Order food or a package, and the app tracks the driver as they move through different zones, updating you as they get closer. Well, that too is geofencing. Even smart houses use it. Your lights turn on when you pull into the driveway. Your thermostat will adjust when you leave the neighborhood. It's all based on your device crossing these invisible digital boundaries. Now imagine that same technology, not sending you a discount or turning your porch light on or getting your house all cozy for you when you get back, but it's being used to figure out who is near a crime scene. Imagine that boundary drawn not for convenience, but for investigation.
Law enforcement calls them geofence warrants. You might also hear the term reverse location warrants. And that word reverse is important because it flips the traditional idea of investigation on its head. Instead of starting with a suspect and building a case, investigators start with a place and a moment in time, and then worked backward to find out who was there.
Could you imagine that? Think about that. Like if you have a group of people and you're there, you have to be ruled out as a suspect.
Right.
So, a key player in this process, well, is none other than Google, which collects location data through Android devices, apps, and services like Maps. When police believe a crime occurred in a certain area, they can request a warrant asking Google for data tied to that location. The process typically unfolds in stages. First, investigators, well, they defined a geographic boundary, sometimes as precise as a single building, and a time window, maybe a few minutes or a few hours. Google then provides the anonymized data, a list of device IDs that were detected within that digital boundary during that time.
At this point, it's not names or phone numbers, just anonymous signals. From there, investigators begin narrowing things down, looking for patterns. Which devices stayed longer? Which ones moved in unusual ways? Which appeared at multiple related locations? As the list gets smaller, police can go back with additional legal requests to ask for identifying information tied to specific devices. And that's the critical shift. Investigators aren't starting with a person, they're starting with everyone who happened to be there and using data to figure out who matters.
Let's do some real world cases here. The theory of geofencing becomes a lot clearer and a lot more unsettling when you really see how it plays out in real investigations. Let's take the United States versus Chat Re. I'm pretty sure that's Chat Re. Is that you agree with that?
Yes, I agree
Okay.
with that.
So this was a bank robber in Virginia with that had few leads. There was no really clear suspect, no obvious trail. So investigators turned to, well, geofence warrants. And they started drawing a digital boundary around the bank during the time of the crime. From that, they received a lot of devices, anonymous at first, and that had been in the area. One of those devices eventually led them to the suspect. But the case didn't stop there. It raised a bigger question that's still echoing through the courts. If police can gather data on everyone in a location just to find one person, does that cross the line into an unconstitutional search?
Then you have to consider cases like State versus Smith, the kind that doesn't always make national headlines but happens more often than people realize. In a murder investigation, a geofence warrant pulls in dozens of devices. People who were walking by, sitting in traffic, maybe even living nearby. Several of those individuals, completely innocent, suddenly find themselves on law enforcement's radar. Some are questioned, some have to explain their movements, and all because their phones were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So let's take a much larger scale look here and go back to January 6th, where the attack on the Capitol. Geolocation data, along with video and other digital evidence, well, that was used to identify individuals who were present at the Capitol. In that context, many see it as justified, even necessary. But it also demonstrated just how powerful and expansive this kind of tracking can be when applied to large groups of people in a single place. Because that's the reality of geofencing. It doesn't just target a suspect, it casts a wide net. And sometimes that net catches exactly who investigators are looking for, but at other times, it catches a lot more than just fish. I don't know how I feel about geofencing.
Me either. It sounds kind of cool in theory, but also like I don't want to be incriminated because I was there.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like Batman's big brother,
Kind of.
kind of.
You know, to understand why geofencing works as well as it does and why it can also go wrong, you have to look at how your phone actually knows where it is. It's not just one system, it's a combination working together in the background. First, there's GPS. Your phone connects to satellites orbiting the Earth and calculates based on timing signals. In ideal conditions, there's clear sky and minimal interference. It can be extremely precise, sometimes within a few meters, but that's only part of the picture.
Then there's Wi-Fi triangulation. Even if you're not connected to a network, your phone, well, it's constantly scanning for Wi-Fi. By comparing those singles to massive databases of known router locations, sometimes often maintained by companies like Google, your phone can estimate where you are. It's especially useful indoors or dense areas where GPS struggles.
And finally, cell tower data. Your phone is always communicating with nearby towers, and by measuring signal strength and timing between multiple towers, your location can be approximated. It's less precise than GPS, but it fills in gaps when other methods aren't available.
All of this gets blended together into a single location estimate. But that estimate isn't really perfect. In dense urban environments, signals can bounce off buildings, creating what's known as urban canyon effects. In rural areas, fewer towers and networks means less data to work with. The result? Your phone might place you across the street or sometimes even hundreds of feet away where you weren't even at. That's kind of like, hey, you were over here at this person's house when you really weren't.
Despite those limitations, a surprising amount of this data can be stored. Services like location history feed into large internal databases, often referred to as things like sensor vault, in reporting where past movements can be retained and later queried under legal request. That means your movements aren't just happening in real time, they can be revisited. And that leads to the uncomfortable reality at the center of all this. Your phone may remember where you were better than you do.
Oh, I know my phone knows where I was at way better than I do.
Same.
What are the pros behind this, right? To understand why law enforcement is leaning into geofencing, you have to look at what it actually offers. And in many cases, it's solving problems that traditional methods struggle with. One of the biggest advantages is, well, speed. In situations where there's no witnesses, no clear suspects, and very little physical evidence, geofence data can give investigators a starting point within hours instead of days or weeks, and it turns a dead end scene into something actionable.
It also allows police to identify suspects they didn't even know to look for. In older investigations, everything depended on tips, informants, or prior records. Now, if someone was physically present at the scene and carrying a phone, there's a chance they show up in the data. That changes the entire dynamic, from reactive to data driven.
Geofencing can also help verify or challenge alibis. If someone says they were nowhere near a crime scene, location data can either support that claim or raise some serious questions. In that sense, it's not just about finding suspects, it's about testing the truth of what people actually say. Okay, if you're a suspect already and you're using geofence to verify, okay, I still don't know how I feel about this.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I came across big fork brands recently, and it's become one of those finds you actually want to tell people about, and you don't find that often. Okay. They're doing bacon sausage, plus these really solid pork jerky snacks and Chicago style sauces. Basically, upgrade anything you throw them on burgers, hot dogs, fries, throw it on there. It works.
But I bet it's packed full of junk.
Actually, it's made with clean ingredients and real care. That's small batch with no shortcuts, and people are obsessed with the flavor. You can go over to bigforkbrands.com, use our code INFOGO at checkout, and get 20% off anything on the site.
You can find the link and our code in the show notes.
Hmm. I don't know. Is that an invasion of privacy? Is, is I find it very fascinating, right? On one hand, like we can catch all these actual criminals, right?
Well, I mean, if you have a crime and a serious crime at that, you have no suspects. I get geofencing. Yeah, let's use it. Let's try to figure it out because, especially if it's murder, because we can't put a value on a human life, regardless, right?
Right.
And I think if you're a suspect already and we're using geofence to test your alibis, I'm okay with that too. I don't know where I really draw the line on this. I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I see the benefits. Anyway, we're going to get into the cons here in a minute, but
There's also a clear efficiency factor. Instead of sending officers door to door asking if anyone saw anything, investigators can quickly narrow down a list of devices and focus their time and resources where it matters most. It doesn't replace traditional police work, but it can dramatically streamline it.
and then there's the simple reality of the modern world. Most people carry, well, their phone everywhere, including criminals. That's not a moral judgment. It's just a fact. The same device you use for directions, messages, and daily life becomes a passive recorder of movement. From a law enforcement perspective, ignoring that kind of data would mean overlooking one of the most powerful and investigative tools available.
But that's what makes this complicated. Geofencing isn't some shadowy sci fi concept, it's an extension of technology we already rely on every day. It's not inherently evil, but it is powerful. And like any other powerful tool, the real question isn't just what it can do, it's how it's used and where the line gets drawn.
All right, that's the pros. Let's dive into the cons of it. But for all of its advantages, geofencing raises some serious concerns, especially when you look at what it means for privacy and civil liberties. The biggest issue starts with scale. By design, geofence warrants, well, they collect data on everyone within a defined area, not just a certain suspect. That means dozens, sometimes hundreds of completely uninvolved people can become part of an investigation without ever even knowing it. It's a digital sweep, a broad, efficient, and indiscriminate tool.
That leads directly into the Fourth Amendment questions. The US legal system is built on the idea that searches should be targeted and based on probable cause. But geofencing flips that model. Instead of identifying a person first, investigators gather data and then figure out who might matter. Cases like Carpenter versus United States have already established that historical location data can be sensitive enough to require strong legal protections. So the question then becomes, if you're collecting location data from everyone in an area, is that effectively a search of multiple people without individualized probable cause? Right.
Hmm. But it's not giving numbers or anything, it's just giving an ID to a phone. There's also the problem of false positives. Location data, well, it isn't perfect. Phones can, well, they can be mislocated by dozens of meters or more, especially in dense cities or rural areas like we talked about with limited signals. That means someone could appear to be at a crime scene when they were actually across the street or just passing by. And once that data puts them on law enforcement radar, they may have to explain themselves, despite having done nothing wrong other than being close by.
Beyond that, there's what's often called the chilling effect. If people know their presence at a location could later be recorded, analyzed, and potentially scrutinized, it can change behavior. Maybe someone thinks twice about attending a protest, visiting a particular place, or even just being in the wrong area at the wrong time. The technology doesn't just observe movement, it can influence it.
And finally, there's the question of who holds the data. That's a big question because much of this information isn't stored by the government. It's held by private companies like Google. That raises a bigger red flag than law enforcement using geofencing than like large companies holding that information.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, how do you think they target? What did we do that episode on where they were targeting ads to you and stuff like that?
Was it marketing?
No, it was how to protect. Is the future watching you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how I feel about that, but this this really creates a complicated dynamic where deeply personal location histories exist in corporate databases, accessible under legal request. It raises a fundamental issue. When your movements are consistently being recorded and stored, who really controls what information and how secure is it really?
This is where geofencing stops being just a tool and becomes a debate about privacy, power, and how far technology should reach into everyday life.
Before we get into the legal battles, I say let's go grab a Coke, sit down, and talk about geofencing.
Pepsi.
We'll be right back. Courts are still split on how to treat geofence warrants. And that division, well, it sits right at the center of a much larger legal uncertainty. On one side, some courts have upheld them, and that reasoning being that investigators are working with anonymized data. It's the first stage, and only later do they add additional steps through legalities. In that view, it's treated as a modern investigative tool and an extension of traditional warrants, just applied to digital environments where people naturally leave data behind.
On the other side, judges and legal scholars have raised sharp constitutional concerns. They argue that geofence warrants resemble something the Fourth Amendment was specifically designed to prevent: general warrants, broad exploratory searches that don't target specific individual or suspect. Instead of "we believe this person committed a crime," it becomes "someone here probably did, so let's collect everyone's data and sort it out later."
Hmm. So the Supreme Court has not yet issued a definitive nationwide ruling that fully settles the question, which leaves lower courts to interpret the issue in different ways. That lack of clarity means the legal standard can shift depending on jurisdiction, creating a patchwork of rules for something that operates nationally and digitally. That is scary on its own.
That is pretty scary. It's with
Yeah.
it not having.
That's the wild, wild west out there because you could go to one county and be like, oh, yeah, you can have it.
Right.
Go to another county, it's like, no, that's personal.
hmm So the core debate then becomes sharper and more philosophical. Is this just a digital version of a traditional search warrant, adapted for a world where evidence is stored in servers instead of filing cabinets? Or is it something closer to a general warrant in modern form, where the search comes first and suspicion comes later?
And underneath all of that is a bigger tension that keeps surfacing in nearly every case involving this technology. The law moves deliberately, cautiously, case by case. Technology does not. It evolves continuously, expanding what is possible long before courts ever have the time to fully define what is acceptable.
And it all circles back to that original moment. You didn't do anything wrong, you were just there. You stopped for coffee, you paid for gas, you walked your dog, ordinary movements that you never think twice about. But in the world of geofencing, those ordinary moments become something else entirely. Data points inside a boundary you never saw, never agreed to, and never even knew existed.
That's the shift at the heart of it all, right? Because geofencing doesn't start with a suspect. It starts with a place, a moment, a digital perimeter drawn after the fact. And from there, the process works backwards, finding everyone who is present, narrowing the list down, and eventually arriving at someone who fits the investigation.
It flips policing in a fundamental way. Instead of find the suspect, it becomes find everyone and narrow it down. And that changes the relationship between people and the spaces they move through every day. Because suddenly, being somewhere isn't just physical anymore. It's recorded, stored, and potentially retracted later.
And that leads to the final reality of it all. Your phone isn't just a tool you carry, it's a witness that never forgets. It logs where you go, it remembers where you've been, and in the wrong context, it can reconstruct a version of your day that you never intended to tell. And sometimes it testifies before you even knew you were on trial.
That's wild.
But I think we got some tips coming up, don't we?
Yes. So, how can you limit your own location tracking? At this point, the question naturally becomes, if phones are constantly being a map of where we go, what can you actually do about it? The answer isn't disconnect completely. For most people, that's not realistic. But you can reduce how much location data is collected, stored, and shared. S-
Yeah, I can't disconnect completely.
Yeah, me either.
You know. Let's start with the most important setting, location permission. On both iPhone and Android apps are they're often default to always allow or precise location. That's more access than most apps actually need. So you can go to your settings and switch non-essential apps to while using the app or deny location access entirely. A weather app doesn't need to track you in the background all day. But if you're trying to order fast food, that precise location is essential.
Yes.
I'm speaking from experience, not that I eat a lot of fast food or anything.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Next, you want to look at system level location history. On many devices, especially Android based systems, location history can be turned off or limited. This stops your phone from continuously building a long term map of everywhere you've been. It won't erase everything instantly, but it reduces what gets stored going forward.
On Apple devices, the equivalent idea lives in location services and significant locations. On an iPhone, Apple lets apps request location access, but you control how broad that access is. In settings, you can set most apps to while using the app instead of always, which prevents constant background tracking when you're not actively using the app. You can also turn off precise location for apps that you don't truly need in that exact moment, which reduces how accurately your movements can be mapped.
Then there's a system level feature called significant locations, part of Apple's location settings. This is Apple's version of location history. It quietly keeps a record of places you visit frequently to improve services like maps, photos, and Siri suggestions. It's encrypted and stored on the device, but it's still a form of behavioral location memory. You can turn it off or clear it in the settings if you don't want that kind of pattern tracking built up over time.
Apple also separates this from broader cloud syncing in ways Android sometimes handles it differently. But the core idea is the same. Even if apps aren't actively tracking you, the operating system can still learn your routines unless you disable this feature. I kind of like that feature though, sometimes.
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 So, in the same way as Android, the key takeaway isn't that tracking disappears entirely, it's that you can reduce how much of a long term location profile your phone is allowed to build in the background.
But there's another big one, Wi Fi and Bluetooth scanning. Even when you're not connected, your phone is still scanning nearby networks and devices to improve location accuracy. Disabling always scanning feature, well, this reduces those passive signals your phone emits in the background.
You can also take control of your advertising ID and tracking permissions. Many apps don't just use location for navigation, they use it for behavioral tracking and targeted ads. Resetting or limiting your ad ID doesn't stop all tracking, but it breaks continuity in how your movements are profiled over time.
For people who want a stronger step, there's the option of airplane mode or powering off your device, especially if you're in sensitive locations. Now, it's not perfect, but it does dramatically reduce active signals like GPS, cell phone pings, and Wi Fi communication.
And finally, it's worth understanding a simple truth. No single setting makes you invisible. This isn't about disappearing, it's about reducing precision, frequency, and performance. Every layer you turn off reduces how detailed your digital footprint becomes. Because in the end, location tracking isn't all or nothing, it's a scale. And the more you understand that scale, the more control you have over where you fall on it.
Now, we should say all of these apply to non-criminal activities. If you're a criminal, leave all that stuff on. So geofencing doesn't exist in a legal vacuum. It behaves very differently depending on where you are in the world, and that difference comes down to how countries treat privacy, surveillance, and personal data.
In the United States, geofence warrants have developed through case law rather than a single clear national rule. That means they've been tested in different courts under different interpretations of the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The result is a patchwork system. Some courts allow geofence warrants under specific conditions, while others question whether they resemble the kind of broad, generalized searches the Constitution was meant to prevent. There is still no definitive nationwide Supreme Court ruling that fully settles how far they can go.
In contrast, Europe approaches the issue, well, from a very different point. Under the General Data Protection Regulation, which GDPR, which is personal data, including location data. It's treated as highly sensitive by default. That means companies and governments must have a clear legal bias to collect and process it. And that collection must be limited to what is strictly necessary. So broad exploratory data requests like geofence warrants, they face a much higher scrutiny under this framework.
European privacy law also emphasizes principles like data minimization and purpose limitation. In simple terms, you're not supposed to collect large amounts of personal data just in case it's useful later. It has to be directly tied to a specific, clearly defined purpose. That creates a higher legal barrier for wide scale location sweeps compared to the US system.
I kind of like theirs better.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean geofencing doesn't exist in Europe, because it does, especially in policing and security context. But it does tend to be more restricted and more heavily reviewed and more tightly bounded by necessity and proportionality standards.
So, what emerges is a split in philosophy. In the US, the debate often centers on constitutional interpretation and involving court rulings. In Europe, it's more about strict regulatory limits on data collection from the start.
And that difference matters because geofencing isn't just a technology. It's a legal mirror, right? The same tool can look like a targeted investigative aid in one system and an overreach and a mass surveillance in another. Really, it's depends on how privacy itself is defined.
Geofencing and license plate readers often get discussed in the same breath because they both turn everyday movement into searchable data, but they track very different things and create very different kinds of surveillance footprints.
Yeah, so those LPRs or license plate readers, they're physical systems, usually cameras mounted on police cars, traffic lights, or highway poles. They scan and record vehicle license plates as cars pass by, creating a timestamp log of where a certain vehicle was seen. These systems are highly visible in infrastructure and tend to be located in certain areas. If your car drives past a camera, it gets recorded. That data can then be used to reconstruct travel patterns tied to a vehicle, not a person directly.
Geofencing, on the other hand, is invisible and device based. Instead of tracking cars, it tracks smartphones using signals like GPS, Wi Fi, and cell towers, rather than capturing a single vehicle passing a fixed point. It can capture all devices inside a drawn boundary during a time window. That makes it broader at the start, even pulling in many people at once before narrowing down.
So, this leads to a key difference in scope and precision. License plate readers are generally targeted by infrastructure. You are only recorded if you pass a certain camera. Geofencing is targeted by geography and time, capturing anyone present in a defined digital area. One is like a series of checkpoints, and the other is like dropping a net over an entire zone.
There's also a difference in what gets identified. LPR data is tied to a vehicle and license plate, which can then be linked to a registered owner. Geofencing starts with anonymous device IDs, which are later narrowed down to individuals through additional data requests.
Hmm. Legally and socially, both raise privacy concerns, but in slightly different ways. LPRs are often criticized for building long term movement histories of vehicles across cities and states. Geofencing raises concerns about broader movement and time sweeps that can pull in innocent bystanders who just happen to be nearby.
In simple terms, license plate readers equal we saw your car here. Geofencing equals everyone's phone here at the same time. Now let's figure out which one matters. Both are powerful, both are growing, and together they show how modern surveillance isn't one system. It's an overlapping network of tools that quietly turn movement into data.
You know, I- I'm really on the fence about this. I mean, I see both sides of it, and I think if it helps save a life, how do you can't put a value on someone taking someone's life or some of those unforgivable crimes, right?
Right.
And if it's a person that was missing or someone that had been kidnapped, y- if I guess I'm going to look at it this way. If it was someone in my family, I would be all for using geofencing.
Same.
You know, you see license plate readers all the time. Geofencing, license plate readers, it gets your license plate. You can go pull it up in any database and figure out who owns the car. Whereas geofencing is like, okay, these group of phones were in this area. Let's figure out which one matters because of where it went from here or where it went from there. So in that sense, it's anonymous until it's not.
Right.
I don't know. That's me talking. I do have a little factoid for you.
Oh,
And we should do a whole episode on license plates. But if you put any kind of thing on your license plate, whether it's in the front or the back, in most states, that is against the law. It is definitely a federal law.
oh,
Yeah,
like the little covers or whatever.
you know how they put the little blacked out covers on top of their plates.
Yeah.
You can be pulled over and given a ticket for just simply having that on your car.
Wow.
You didn't know that?
I did not.
Yeah, you can even the border that goes around the license plates is sometimes illegal.
Oh,
Yeah, there's federal laws and then there's state laws. State laws are usually a lot stricter than the federal ones, but you are not allowed to alter or cover that license plate in any kind of shape, form, or fashion.
dang.
So if you get pulled over and the cop goes, "Hey, I'm pulling you over because you got a cover on your license plate," probably going to get a ticket.
Right.
Not adding anything to geofencing.
I mean, I agree with everything you said for the most part. Like, I don't have anything really different to say.
Oh, okay. But yeah, geofencing. Write us and let us know your thoughts. I mean, we're open to that.
Absolutely.
All right. If you would like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you would like to support the show, you can do so at Patreon or take advantage of one of our sponsors, and those links are in the show notes.
As always, Kat and I want to say thank you, whether you've been with us from day one or just tuning in.
You can join the Facebook group at Info on the Go. Over there, you can get to know us or ask us a question.
But whatever you're doing, stop. Unless you're driving, don't stop. Keep going. And when you get somewhere, make sure you hit that follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Send us some fan mail using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
We really do love reading your fan mail and leaving that review. It really does help others find us in a world, ever growing world of podcast. But if you would like, you can email Kat or myself directly at,
Info on the Go podcast at gmail.com.
and all of this is in the show notes. Till next time.
Stay curious.
Every morning starts with a choice. Don't settle for just coffee. Rise up with strong coffee. Meet the world's strongest cup of joe. Strong isn't just a drink, it's a movement. And strong stands for striving to reach our natural greatness.
Born from one simple need to be better. They rebuilt coffee from the ground up, infusing organic coffee with collagen, protein, nootropics, and functional ingredients that fuel your body and sharpen your mind. There's no crash, no compromises, just clean energy, focus, and flavor that fires you up.
Whether you're chasing kids, chasing goals, or chasing greatness, don't just wake up, rise up. Strong coffee, the world's strongest cup of joe, for a world ready to be better.
Use code INFOGO at checkout to save 15%.